Hi there, my name is Sebastian Straub and I'm the Principal Solutions Architect at N2WS. In this video, I'm going to take you through the configuration and management of users within N2WS Backup and Recovery. What's important to understand about N2WS Backup and Recovery is that every object within the application has ownership. Let me show you what I'm talking about. When you define accounts, that allows us access to your AWS or your Azure accounts, then you will find that the accounts are being created in somebody's name. That's the user. Same thing applies to schedules and also to policies. So there is clearly an ownership of resources within N2WS Backup and Recovery. Of course, not everything can be done with just one single admin user. So what I'm going to show you now is how you can create additional users and how you can assign permissions to these users. You can get to the user management if you choose server settings, and then on the left side of the screen, users. Here you can create new users. When you create new users, you can create two different user types, managed and independent. The difference between them is what can the root admin user see and do for each of these users? Independent users are standalone users. They create their own schedules and policies. The root admin user can verify that they are performing backups, size, and resource type. But even the root admin user cannot see what precisely is being backed up. This is really convenient if I want to give either a specific person or a group of people access to the N2WS backup capability, but what is being backed up will not be available to me as the root admin user. This tremendously increases the security. Managed users are very similar. I can also create schedules and policies for these managed users within the managed user account. But as the root admin user, I still have oversight. I can create resources for those users. All of this is probably a little bit confusing, so let me show you exactly how it works. For starters, let's create an independent user. An independent user can be a supervisor and have the ability to see other managed users' resources. And I can choose that in this drop-down menu. I also have the ability to take certain features away from that user or give access to that feature to the users. For example, file and folder level recovery. The default setting is that that is turned on. I can also give them access to the cost explorer, and I can also give them access to the volume usage alerts. I can also create quotas for the resources that this user is allowed to back up. All you have to do is just simply turn this on and select the quota that you want to allow for that user. Next, of course, we should give it a name. And just so that it's less confusing, I'm going to make this an independent user. I can also define the email address, and I can also assign a password. All I have to do now is just hit the Save button, and I have a new user. Before we log in as this new user, let me show you what, as the root admin user, I can see. These are the backups that have been performed, disaster recovery backups, volume usage percentage reports. If I go to the backup monitor, I can see all of the backups which have been performed over time. I can also see the account which has been assigned to this user. Let's change it up now. I'm going to log out as the root admin user. I'm going to log in as that new user that we just created. As you can see, there are no resources available to this user because it's a brand new user. Remember what I mentioned, that independent users have their own schedules, their own policies. So what we need to do now is we actually need to define an account for this user. And I can either assume a role or I can use an IAM user. Now I need an access key, which I already have because I already created that user. I'm going to paste that in here. Then I also have a secret access key. And here I have two more options. Do I want to allow this user to scan resources using tagging? Probably not a bad idea. And I can also choose which regions they can search for scanned tags in. So this can be resource types and also the scanned regions themselves. And I also have the option to do capture VPC, which will then capture the VPC settings, subnet settings, routing tables, and security groups for the backed up resources. I'm going to hit the Save button, and now I have a new user created. This is an account access to my AWS account. As you can see right here, that's the cloud that I can access now. Still two more things that we need. We need a schedule. So let's create that real quick. I want that to happen every day at midnight. And I don't ever want this schedule to expire. And I want this to repeat once a day. I'm going to click Save. And now I can do the same thing for policies. So I'm going to create a new policy, which I create for this account. That policy is turned on. I can now associate it with a schedule. We already created a schedule. Auto target removal is an interesting feature as well. If you ever want to completely automate the backup process, and if N2WS Backup and Recovery finds resources or is lacking resources, such as somebody deleted an instance, well, what's going to happen every time we try to back it up, it's going to throw an alert. And then perhaps you're in an environment where you dynamically create resources, break down and stand up resources. Well, if that's the case, then you're going to get bombarded with a lot of alerts. If you want to avoid this, then you can allow N2WS to delete those mentions of those resources in a backup policy just simply by selecting yes. Another option also is, of course, yes and alert. What's going to happen is it will delete that reference to that deleted resource, but it will send you one single alert. Now I can also choose what I want to back up using that policy. And of course, I have access to my resources in my AWS account. I'm going to click Add Selected. And there you go. Now I can hit the Save button. And now I have everything I need. So I have access to an account, I have a schedule, and I also have a policy. So we're going to run that policy real quick. We're going to go to the backup monitor. So the backup is in progress. So as you can see, now as the independent user, I have a backup. I also have information about the volume usage, and in my backup monitor, I can also see the resource itself. That's my policy, that's the account. Now, what happens if we log in as the root admin user? So nothing has changed here. And if I go into the backup monitor, then you can also see that the most recent backup was not the backup we just processed for the independent user. So that's what I was talking about when I mentioned that independent users are standalone users. They can create their own schedules and policy, and even the root admin cannot see what is being backed up. Of course, I can run reports, usage reports, and see what type of resources are being backed up and how many resources are being backed up. This system is ideal also for MSPs. If you want to offer N2WS Backup and Recovery as a service to your customers, and you want to give them complete independence, freedom to create their own resources. Let's go back to our independent user. And here are still the resources that are backed up. Now let's say this independent user is a person who needs to give access to the resources that they're managing to another person. This is something that you can configure as well. So if we go back to the root admin user, the root admin user has user management permissions. I'll go to server settings, users. That's the independent user that we created. And when I select that user, I can also create delegates for this user. This means I can create additional users who can log in and have access to the same resources as this particular user. And again, I have the granularity to allow or disallow certain features, such as performing recoveries, changing accounts, changing backup policies, and also changing notification settings. This is how you can create delegates. Let's cover managed users now. So I'm going to go back to users. I'm going to create a new user, managed user this time. I'm going to call it managed user and choose what kind of quotas I want to assign to this user. Now I created a managed user, and of course I can also create delegates for that managed user as well. So let's go ahead and log in as that user. And again, this is exactly what we would expect to see. There are no resources for that user because it's a brand new user. So just as before, we need to give this user access to our account. Access key, secret key. Of course, you could also do this with an assume role function. And now I have access to the AWS account. I'm going to create a schedule. Let's change things up. I'm going to say that this is a schedule that happens at 1 in the morning, repeats every day. Now we have a schedule. Now let's create accordingly a policy for the managed account. I'm going to associate that with the schedule. Then I'm going to select something that gets backed up. And click on Save. So now I'm going to run that policy. And I can follow that in the backup monitor. And there it is. So the backup has finished. And then as the managed user, I can now see my backup right here in the backup monitor with all of the different resources. Now, as you can probably imagine already, what's going to happen if we log in as the root admin user, the managed user is slightly different from what we can see from the independent user. So if I go into the backup monitor, we can literally see that policy has run. And I can see that from within the backup console of the root admin user. I can also see the policies that this person created. And I can even make changes to them as well. So if I select this, I could make changes to this, change the schedule. So that's the main difference between managed users and independent users. I hope you found this useful. Thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you in the next video.